So let me tell you where the name resistance axis comes from. George Bush, when he started the war on terror, right? And bombing Afghanistan, bombing Iraq. Around this time, he had a speechwriter called David Frum. And he came up with this term, axis of evil, right? That's him. And so he was a speechwriter for George Bush, and he coined the term axis of evil. And guess who he was talking about? Iraq, Syria, Iran, North Korea. This is the axis of evil. It's like some cartoonish phrase. And the Arabs took this term and turned it on its head and turned it into axis of resistance, because they're resisting Western imperialism, Western colonialism, and that's where it comes from. And you also in Arabic, like we don't say axis necessarily, but just resistance, al-muqawamah, right? So when we're talking about the Palestinians, we just say the resistance, al-muqawamah. It's like let me give you the example of in World War II. If you would say the resistance, you know what resistance we're talking about, against Nazism, right? And so this is the same thing in Arabic. Now, this term means the resistance against Zionism, against U.S. imperialism, British neocolonialism. That's what it means, al-muqawamah. And it's not just confined to Palestinians. It could, again, it could be referred to the Yemenis, Iran, Syria, and so on. And so this fine, really, really nice person over here, David Frum, George Bush's speechwriter. I mean, that's like basically, being Goebbels, Dr. Goebbels, modern equivalent of that. And that's where he came up with it. And you know what David Frum is today? So he is, of course, a neoliberal darling. So what you've had is this transition of all the neoconservatives. Again, the neoconservatives are talking about George Bush, Ronald Reagan, Colin Powell, Condoleezza Rice, Dick Cheney, Paul Wolfowitz. These neoconservatives who believe that the world is divided into good and bad, and America is a force for good, and it must intervene wherever to fight evil, which is just a nice way to sell wars. And he's, of course, one of them, right? So being Bush's speechwriter, he's a neocon. And he is now a liberal darling. So you have all these neoconservatives who've now gone over from the Republican Party to the Democratic Party. Not just him, Bill Kristol is another one. And so they're trying to rebrand themselves and try and wash the blood off of their hands from Iraq, Afghanistan, and so on, right? This whole war on terror, which they started, which has killed God knows how many millions of people. And so now they're liberal darlings. Why? Because they oppose Trump. That's their whole shtick, right? You can even see this article here. Conservative David Frum on escaping a Trump dead end, right? It's so vile. And it's like the same thing you see with Liz Cheney and, her father. I don't need to explain Dick Cheney, right? Mr. Halliburton. She's a liberal darling now. Like, these never Trump Republicans were just neocons. I mean, Jesus Christ, I'm no fan of Trump. But, if you want to compare neoconservatives who started the war on terror, who did, created the Department of Homeland Security, who started all this NSA mass surveillance, the CIA torture. I mean, Jesus Christ. Like, do you not see the difference here? Again, Trump is not really any better, but why are you letting neocons, like these mass murderers, these people who slaughtered millions, suddenly, rebrand themselves and embracing them? Literally the other day, Dick Cheney was in the Capitol and they all lined up to shake his hand. Like, he started the fucking war in Iraq. Are you people high? This guy was the head of Halliburton, which profited from these wars. Are you fucking high? But, this is the kind of scum. They're fine with this. The swamp is both parties. And so, the neoconservatives can be Republicans, Democrats, doesn't matter. It's the same swamp. It's disgusting. And that's why the Democrats embrace them with open arms, because they're comfortable with neocons, because they are themselves neocons. They are themselves agents of imperialism. There's no difference at the end of the day. They're both mass murderers who export violence for corporate profit. And so it's not incompatible It's not incompatible to embrace Dick Cheney and Bill Kristol and David Frum and all these nasty people. Look at Nicole Wallace, the host on MSNBC. She used to be the fucking White House spokesperson for George Bush. And now she's on MSNBC acting like she has nothing to do with that. She was even on television saying that it's good to torture people, you know, justifying the torture program on television. These are the kinds of scumbags that we're talking about here. A disgusting, loathsome swamp, truly. And so that's where the term axis of evil comes from neocons, right? But we turned it on its head, we flipped it on its head, we flipped it around and renamed it to the axis of resistance, or just simply the resistance. And I find it really insulting or stupid when, these never Trump liberals call themselves the resistance. Resistance to what? You're all the same shit. You are all the same gang of elites in Washington, D.C. There's no difference between you. You're not better because you think that, you want to paint yourself in contrast to Trump and that makes you better. You're both just as bad. You're the same swamp. You're the same loathsome characters and agents of capitalism and imperialism. Draining the swamp. Oh, never Trump. It's all the same. It's all the same. And so when we talk about muqawamah, when we talk about the resistance, don't get it twisted. Resistance is Palestinian resistance against Zionism, Syrian resistance against Zionism and the US-backed Al-Qaeda and terrorists, Iran resistance, Venezuela, North Korea, Cuba, Yemen, Iraq, Lebanon. This is the resistance, the real resistance. Never forget that. It's very important. Don't let these clowns co-opt the term. The true resistance in our day and age is to imperialism. Is to Western imperialism. And that's where, and you will find that resistance in Venezuela, right? In Cuba, Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, Iran, Yemen, Palestine. That's where the real resistance is, even North Korea. The US killed 20% of North Korea's population. And then they wonder why the North Koreans don't like you. You killed literally 20% of those people. You bombed everything in sight. Christ.